Well, welcome everyone. As Dave mentioned, I'm a long-time member with the local chapters, but also long-time member with the national organization. So I have a little bit of, I guess I'd call it a pep talk. I wish it was more of a scholarly presentation. I think there is a lot of material that is worth looking further into, but I'll just say what I want to do today is talk a little bit about the national organization, talk about local chapters. The Northern New England chapter and Southern New England chapter are local chapters of the national group. I'm going to talk about another organization I'm part of called Industrial History New England. All right. Talk a little bit about one of our initiatives with IHNE and explain some of the work we want to do in building more understanding of industrial sites in New England. So I have an apology because I feel like I overpromised, but I want to over-deliver on my under-promise, if you will. I think industrial surveys are essential for the work of SIA and our local chapters. And I'll talk more about the survey process. And my hope is to get some of you involved in helping us with that work. As I looked over the history of industrial surveys, I am humbled by the work that was done in the 1960s. There were people like Robert Vogel, Pat Malone, Richard Candy, others who were trailblazers in this field of making industrial history a topic and something that has value to our community. The places where they worked, the National Park Service, the Smithsonian, the Historic American Engineering Record, all of them in different ways today are challenged. We need to do our work to elevate them and make sure they are still important to our world today. And I hope all of you can help us with that. So first I'm going to talk about the Society for Industrial Archeology. And just out of curiosity, show of hands, how many in the audience are today a member of the SIA? Yay! Hey, look, that's awesome. Yes, right. So it looks like there's maybe half the, yeah, okay. All right, well, one of my hopes today is that I will inspire you to either go online or send a check. Membership today is $50, but I'm going to give you a heads up. I think they're going to raise membership dues just because they haven't done it for about 20 years. And then there's the website for SIA. So one of the primary programs of SIA is their national conference. It's coming up, it's usually end of May, and this year it'll be in Norfolk, Virginia. I know at least a couple people in the audience are going, Pat and Gray. Anybody else gonna make their way to Norfolk? Okay, awesome. Yeah, oh, Chuck Perry, yeah. Okay. You know, I think a couple years ago when I talked about the national conference, people in the audience made the good point. It is expensive to go. Registration is not inexpensive. Travel is not expensive. The lodging, so I mean, it's a commitment to go. But every conference I've attended, I've never regretted it. You learn about these different areas, you hear different talks, you meet different people. In a way, it strengthens your connection to that community. And I think there's papers and process tours. You know, if you've never gone, think about it. And we'll talk about another thing too. Another part of the SIA program are the publications. And I think 2 years ago, or maybe when I joined the board, I'm in my third year as a director, I got emails pretty quickly pointing out how far behind the journal is. And for many young scholars who are trying to make their way, having their work published and publishing industrial heritage topics in the journal is a good thing. Well, I think finally SIA is starting to catch up. We have a new journal editor. He is Norwegian, but works at the University of Iowa, and I'm not going to try and pronounce his name. But one thing that I am encouraged by is he comes from the field of preservation studies. He worked for the State Historic Preservation Office in Iowa, and he's bringing something that's a little bit more of applied history rather than purely an academic approach to the journal. So I'm hopeful that there will be kind of a relaunch. I know there will be a relaunch, and I hope for all of you in the audience, there will be topics that you would find of interest in the journal. The newsletter, actually, it's interesting. Our newsletter editor lives in New Hampshire, Marnie Blake, and I keep hoping that I would see her at one of these conferences, but I think she has a hard time getting. But these are two important things. We have the conference, we have our publication, we support local chapters like the Northern and Southern New England chapter of the SIA, but there is a new initiative to start or restart, I don't know if they had ever been a thing, what we're calling special interest groups. There is one very active one with a focus on iron and steel history. And out of curiosity, anybody participate in the Iron, Pat, and Gray? Yeah, there are a few people. So they offer like monthly talks that are on Zoom. And at the conference, I know there will be a series of papers that are organized by the Iron and Steel Heritage Forum. There is some discussion about starting a special interest group that would focus on bridges. More talk about starting one that would cater to people who are interested in history museums. So in a way, what we would do, just like local chapters, except without being bound by geography, there would be an opportunity to interact with people with similar interests. You can find out about the local chapters on the SIA website. I don't think we have yet a page for the special interest groups. SIA gives grants and scholarships. At the annual conference, there are awards recognizing the great work of members. We have our local chapter program with special interest groups. I, as a board member, have participated in a couple committees. I'm a member of the local chapter committee, so we work with Mike and or Matthew and David and the Southern New England Leadership Group. SIA is part of national and international organizations, so your involvement with SIA would connect you to HARE or TICI, which is an international group interested in industrial heritage. And then I totally appreciate the community that I am part of. There are so many people in my professional work in museums who I've connected with through SIA. But it's, you know, I think it's really an important group. So if you aren't a member, join us. I put some membership flyers on the back table. So pick one up, and you know, I sincerely hope that you will see that your participation in this local chapter really connects you to the national organization. I mentioned the work of the SIA local chapter committee. We do have quarterly meetings with the leadership of our local chapters. And the question is, what can the national organization to help the local chapters do to make your work better? And, you know, I think we've got a lot of ideas and we're gradually working on them. You know, the SIA website is a powerful tool that can bring attention to the work of the local chapters. We can help promote your events. We can help with your efforts to bring in members. We can help you support your programs. And the only way we know more about what's important to the local chapters, if your leadership kind of funnels back what your needs are to the national organization. And I say, you know, the health of the local chapters is really essential for the growth of SIA. I wanted to recognize how important these kind of annual meetings are. I mean, I always enjoy coming to these meetings. I think it's a place for people to share what they're working on, to learn what's happening in the area. And the tours are wonderful. This is a view of the Bridgewater Foundry in Mass. We did a tour there 2 years ago. This is one of the better process tours I had ever been part of. And out of curiosity, how many people were there? Oh my God. All right. Don't forget to go on the tours of the local chapters. They're really, really wonderful. All right, I'm going to turn now to Industrial History New England. And this is 6 years old. Perhaps Eric Peterson is one of the stewards. This is a project that started after a meeting in Amesbury where I gathered people who were interested in industrial museums. We had, you know, a really good, there's probably 40 people in the audience who were part of the museum community. We talked about how we can support each other's work, how we could, you know, offer, you know, resources that would be of use. And it kind of sat for a couple years. And then Eric Peterson and Bob Perry, who's with the Charles River Museum, Eric with the Metropolitan Waterworks Museum, we got together and we started to think, well, what could we do? Eric had an intern from BU, and we put Akil to work, and we started to build a website. And the website, in the generalist terms, is really intended to be an index, a way to connect with industrial sites in New England. And more than anything, I think that's our most public-facing program. We have a leadership group. There's about 7 or 8 of us, and we actually meet every other week. We work on the program, if you will. That's, you know, how can we update the website? What kind of activities can we offer? We actually do site visits and tours. And I think most recently, one of the notable things is we've created something called a professional affinity group that's affiliated with the New England Museum Association. We have an annual meeting at the NEMA conference. We do a walking tour of wherever the conference happens to be. And we organize workshops and tours. Coming up is it April 8th? There will be a tour with the NEMA PAG of museums in New Bedford, Mass. We're going to the Whaling Museum and the New Bedford Fishing Heritage Center. And then I think there's a bonus tour of a historic house that'll be there. And the other activity that we do with NEMA is we have a technical workshop where we bring speakers who are working on some aspect of industrial history, and we offer an annual program with that. Anyway, it's just Industrial History New England is something that's starting to take form, and it's something that I think can have a lot of value, a lot more actually than we do now. There's 6 New England states. For every one of our states, there is a regional rep, someone who is kind of the steward of the information that is out there. I have stepped up and I'm the New Hampshire steward. And I want to share a little bit of my, this is the work ahead. For the state of New Hampshire, we have 10 sites listed. And I know we can do more than that. But what we try to do is identify resources in every state that people could go and visit and learn something about the local industrial history. 6 is not very much, and I know we can do better. And by doing better, what I think that means is to survey more of the things that are in the state of New Hampshire or in the other New England states, and bring that information to our website. So this is where I started to think about the survey process, because the question is, how do you know what's in your region? How do you learn about that? And I think this is where there's been some very inspiring work done in the past, and something that for all of us, at least with Industrial History New England, and hopefully some of you who might get involved would want to help us with that. So, you know, if you're, out of curiosity, I know some of you have been really involved with this in your career, Pat and Chuck and Gray, but has anybody ever really worked to put together a survey of industrial sites? Yeah, some more people here. Awesome. So what my experience in doing this, and even on a local level, like when I worked in Amesbury, I took on a position there, and there really hadn't been an effort to bring the information about local industrial history together in a form. And in the process of doing that, a group of volunteers, we learned so much, and that became the essence of programming that we developed and we offered. So I think of doing an industrial survey as the foundation for the kind of programs that any organization can offer. And here I'm thinking of the Northern and Southern New England chapters. So I think there's an opportunity here. So of course, the Historic American Engineering Record, or the Historic American Building Survey, or the American Landscape, you can find incredible information on the Library of Congress website. And just by searching your town or your state or industry, material will come up and show you what other people have done. Working with your state historic preservation office, every state has a state historic preservation officer, and part of their work is to compile an inventory of historic sites and to note whether they're industrial. And they do that as a way of managing the use of federal money and development. So this is the New Hampshire Division of Historic Resources. And they have an online interface with their survey, EMIT, Enhanced Mapping and Management Information Tool. But just out of curiosity, does anybody interface with your state historic? Are you part of the office? No? It's archaeologists. Massachusetts has MACRAS, and I can't tell you, Connecticut has one. Concord, thank you very much. So, okay. Okay. So what we're mentioning is each division of historic resources has a tool that they use to identify historic resources in the state. And for people who are trying to build understanding, it is like a vital resource. I think historic maps are another resource. This is something that we use very on with the Industrial History New England. This is a 1919 industrial map of New England. Can't really see it, I apologize. This came from the Digital Commonwealth, but it's great because it gives a little icon and reminds you of what the primary industries were in those different areas. WPA guides, these are still helpful things. These were all written after the Depression. New Hampshire, every state has one. And then here I am highlighting some of the very early industrial survey works. This was the New England Textile Mill Survey. It was work that was done in the late 60s. Robert Vogel, James Massey, finally published in 1971. But this is available online, and what it does is it can show you information about industrial resources in your area. It only worked in 3 states, 10 cities, and there were 22 sites that were listed. But for the very first time, this was a survey that focused on industrial resources. A couple years later, once the historic American engineering record was established, Alan Comp published and I know there are a lot of people who are working to help this survey. Basically, it's a checklist of industrial resources in all of the 6 New England states. So an incredible number of sites it's really just a checklist with a link or a mention to where you can find more information. Kind of the next iteration of this is something that's a more organized listing. This was a tour. It was published by the Museum of American Textile, Merrimack Valley Textile History Museum, and focused on resources in Massachusetts, 22 towns, many sites that give you a little bit more narrative about what the resources are that are there. Well, worry not. You don't have to take notes. If you want to, you can go to the Industrial History New England website, and we have a resource tab where you can find these surveys and a link to them online. So we've uploaded them. Yeah, this is late-breaking news, but you know, again, I have to say, when I look back at this work, it is humbling to think of the people who were organizing it, you know, and the work they did to bring industrial history to the surface. So here, if you will, is, you know, kind of where I think the question is, how do we do more with this? I mean, I am taking seriously my job to be the state rep for New Hampshire. I've listed my email, and I invite every one of you to reach out to me and say, hey, did you think about this place? Here's somewhere I wish you could visit. I think with both the northern and the southern New England chapters, we could do more programming work with those groups, either after we're doing a survey, in the midst of a survey, to bring forward the things that we've learned. I just think this is a really important part of our work. When I was working on that bibliography of the sites that are listed on IHNE, I talked with Pat Malone, I talked with Richard Candy, and I talked with Stephen Lubar. And Stephen Lubar sent me back something that someone who works at a college and is working with young people and has their own website would do. He asked ChatGPT to put together a map of hair sites in Rhode Island. And it generated, and I'm so sorry, you can't even see it, but it generated a map showing all the hair sites. And it's just like, oh my God, this is too much information.
Well, I think it links directly to the inventory entry from the Rhode Island inventory.
It does, definitely. So, I mean, this was something that Stephen said, hey, maybe something like this could be helpful. So I could see Industrial History New England or some other group even putting a little tab where you could go to see what are the maps of every single hair site if you wanted to. And actually, this is another part of what I think I'm inspired by with all of this. SIA could strengthen their partnership with the local chapters. And what Industrial History New England is trying to do for the New England chapters, maybe we could make that a model that could be a way to help activate and bring new types of activities to those local chapters. There's my email. My last slide is just kind of something that I think also is pretty inspiring when you think about New England and our work in industrial heritage. SIA in 1968 did the Hudson Mohawk survey, and that actually was the basis for what became. Okay, thanks. And the gas holder from Troy, which is the two-story one, became the part of the logo for SIA. And here we are in Concord, and we have the gas holder, I think it's on Main Street. It was But the Troy was built in 1883 or 1878, and ours was built in 1888. Was a little bit at risk, and I think there's effort today to save it. So there's another opportunity to use industrial heritage to kind of build a stronger sense of community. I'll just say thank you, but I hope people have thoughts and questions. Yeah. Yes. No newsletters. There's a link to the group, but we haven't made like a separate portal for every local chapter. What we have right now is we have a listing with a way to contact those local chapters. So at least you go to the national page and then you can get to the local chapters. Yeah. Yeah, I will. I don't think so. I think what we've realized is making everything standardized was really complicated. But I am a man of my word, and we have a local chapter meeting coming up next month, and I'll talk about that again. Yeah, awesome.
How many active local chapters are there in fact in the SIA?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think we have 8 or 9.
Active? I mean, they're doing things?
They are doing things.
Okay. I just a few years ago, I attempted to contact
Yep.
several of them, and the most common word that I heard was moribund.
Yep.
Moribund.
Right.
Moribund.
Right.
So
Right.
that's changed?
It's changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is the Roebling chapter back
Roebling is, yes, it is. That's
Lower Hudson Valley?
right. And New York City, yeah, absolutely. Roebling has 400 members.
Okay, but so they're putting on programs?
Yes,
like this?
yes. Yeah. Yeah, I will say it's a spectrum. Not everyone is functioning at the highest level, but when we have our local chapter meetings with them, there are representatives from them who are trying to do the work. I know the Washington D, the MEGS chapter is just starting up. Again, it had been very active, so.
You know off the cuff if there's an active chapter somewhere in the Midwest?
In Ohio and Indiana, yes, the Wabash.
Okay.
I think the Montana chapter closed. I know there's one in Cleveland. The Samuel Knight chapter in California had been dormant and has just come back to life. So.
If sometime you could give me the information.
Yeah.
On the Wabash.
Okay.
Chapter,
I would be glad to, Nelson. Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, that is another part of what the National Committee is trying to do is to simplify how you make a chapter, to make it a little easier for people to form a meeting with people who are like-minded and interested and help them get started. SIA now uses a member database. So if you wanted to, you could ask how many SIA members are in a certain area and reach out to them and see if they were interested in starting a group. So yeah, that's a really good question. I will say this is my 3rd year on the board with SIA, and when I became a board member, I really felt like the organization was sleepy. And we did a strategic plan, and we've rebuilt our committees. It will take time for action to follow, but people are starting to work on it. And I really think that people care deeply about industrial history and trying to continue to make that a thing. And this would be my other question for all of you. I mean, if you look around the room, except for a few, we're pretty senior in our age. So how do we take this work and make it meaningful to a younger audience? And actually, there may be an answer in some of the survey work we do. Like, my kids are interested in what's happening in the environment, or how do we deal with some of these, climate issues that are around us. So is there an opportunity to kind of add a dimension to our work as people interested in industrial history and find a way to bring young people into working on the field? That's a really important challenge, I think. Otherwise, when we're all gone, so will our work. And that's not a good thing. Jerry.
Case in point, you're right on. Younger generation looking at colors. So the key question is, how do we use early, interesting, creative, industrial technologies as a intensive, challenging inspiration middle school?
Yeah.
Middle school and high school. What someone said to me is that after elementary school, kids are lost
Mm.
on the
Yeah.
educational program.
Yeah. When I was just entering the field, I spent a year working at the Charles River Museum, and they produced a curriculum that was based on industrial archaeology, and it was intended to be used in local schools. I think the curriculum never really flourished. One of the contributors to that was an author, his name is David Weitzman, and that would be a name worth looking at, and that would be a name that we should have up on our web. He inspired me. One of David's book was, there were two, that one was called My Backyard History Book, and it simply focused on things that were around you and gave you kind of inspiration to look at that and use that to make meaning of your community. And the other was Underfoot. That was a little bit more refined by that, but they're still really wonderful books. And if you think about a younger audience, I want to believe that those are, portals that can get them involved. But even more, I think we have to be willing to give the younger kids keys to the car and let them drive the program. Don't feel like they have to do what we're doing, but give them support so they can bring their ideas to the podium. And we really got to figure that out. All right, I'm done. Thank you very much, everybody.